Welcome to the Sabbath Hour broadcast. Your host today is Sister Alberta Wiggins, and with us today we have Sister Helen James, the Bible instructor of the Mid-City Seventh-day Adventist Church. We're going to be talking to you again about Daniel. We're going into the second chapter of Daniel. You know, it begins with the Babylonian Empire and the authority that he had over the Israelites, the power, and how he tried to persuade them to change their way of thinking, to turn to his God and worship his God, because he felt that he was such a great king and that he had all the power. And of course, in those days, he was an all-powerful king, and many feared him. And he thought, well, these young captives, I'll bring them in and I'll make them bend and bow to my gods. But you know, God had a plan, and his plan that he would have some chosen remnant of Israel that would be faithful to him, and that was represented by the 3 Hebrew children. The focal point of each expansion is always the end times. Remember, we're focusing on the end time because Daniel prophesied about things that would be happening in the end time, but he used the faithfulness of these young men to bring to play the fact that we must be faithful to God regardless of the circumstances we find ourselves in. Sister James, you have something that you would like to read to us today?
Well, Daniel 2 begins with the Babylonian Empire, and it culminates in the soon return of Jesus Christ. Now, all of the prophecies of Daniel cover the same basic period. So what is different? Each prophecy expands on the previous prophecy, so that by the time you finish the book of Daniel, you have a good idea of what God wants you to know and all of the end time prophecies. Another factor we need to keep in mind is in trying to understand the prophecies of Daniel, only the nations that impact on God's covenant people are mentioned. Yes, there were other great nations, but it's God's chosen people that we're following through biblical records. So what happened to Nebuchadnezzar? He had a dream one night. And what's unusual about that? Nebuchadnezzar, this all-powerful king who had absolute power, take a man's life, whatever he wanted to do, take his wife and kill her, or whatever he wanted to do. He had absolute power. So it was that this king had a dream. But when he had this dream, it left him. Now you would say, well, what's so important then about the dream? You dream a dream and you forget it. God let Nebuchadnezzar know that there's something different about the dream that you had. So Nebuchadnezzar had a bunch of people on his payroll. Oh, they were in contact with the dead. They read the stars, and they called them soothsayers, and they called them necromancers, and they called them astrologers. They had all types of means of the pseudosciences, those false sciences that told them about the future. So since they were on the payroll of the king, he called them all in. He said, all right, now I've had a dream. I want you to tell me about this dream. Show me what this dream is. They said, certainly, king, we'll tell you. But first of all, tell us what the dream was. He said, I can't remember.
Are you saying that the king expected these wise men, these soothsayers and astrologers, and of course men that said they could call up the dead, and he expected them to remember what his dream was? Wasn't that a kind of unusual request? A request, you know, they could have thought that he was trying to find some way to get rid of them. But I guess these men had already stated that they could do all this, so the king expected it.
Right.
Expected it of them.
That's exactly right. As a matter of fact, the king told them, if you don't tell me what I dreamed, I'm going to kill you and destroy your whole entire household. And so these men stood there dumbfounded. The king realized he had been taken advantage of in the past. If they could have an inkling of what the king dreamed, they would conspire together to give the king such an ambiguous answer that whichever way it went, that they would still be credited with knowing. But here it was that the dream was gone. And were the Babylonians wise men able to interpret that dream? No, because he couldn't tell them what it was. So they finally acknowledged that no king has ever asked such a thing of his wise men. As a matter of fact, we want to tell you that this takes a supernatural power to reveal this. The gods whose habitation is not here on the earth. It's going to take somebody else to tell you other than us. So the king in his wrath said, all right, everybody's going to get killed. Well, you remember that Daniel and his 3 companions were also a part of the wise men, but they somehow had not been called into question. And the first that they knew that they were about to be slain is when the executioner came to the door and said, well, you're about to be killed. He said, well, what's all the hurry about? Or why are we going to be destroyed? He said, just a minute. We need some time to think about this. So he went in and he asked for time. Now the king had already told the other wise men, no, you're waiting on time to give you time to get concoct a lie, because he no longer had faith in them. But God was working behind the scenes. First of